want to thank His Excellency 𝐸𝐴𝐬𝐸 and Professor Tyagi, Professor Ramesh Srivastava, who will be hearing later on, Shalini, Shraddha, Anjani, for making this possible. And I want to thank all of you. And I hope that after this webinar, you will become ambassadors of the group and let other people know that this group is there to help them.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Dwivedi, Mr. Rajesh Tyagi, Dr. Srivastav, Ms. Nalini Toscano, and all our young friends who are tuning in. It's especially for them that we've put together this wonderful initiative. Well, let me start by commending Dr. Dwivedi and all other friends who've come together to promote this initiative of Sahyog, or support for Indian students. This has been a long felt demand from the beginning of the year, a long felt need that we ought to have a support group of this nature. I think the context has been very well brought out by you. We have today 230,000 Indian citizens, Indian students, which is a very important community for India, because these are Indian citizens coming into Canada, and certainly for Canada, because this is high quality human resource, human capital coming into Canada. And as a Canadian leader recently told me, this is low hanging fruit for Canada, because many of our friends who are coming in as students are going to be potentially immigrants, are going to be workers, are going to be become Canadian citizens at some point of time. So these are people who are important to Canada and important to India. And hence, when we have these conversations, when I have these conversations with university presidents, for instance, we keep the interests of our students front and center, of those who are already in and those who are coming in. We've also this year has been especially a year of disruption. As you've mentioned, this year was not just because of COVID, but because of multiple global factors. And also, this is certainly when you're a youngster coming into a new environment, you're jumping into the deep end, and you're facing multiple shocks, including a cultural shock, including a shock in terms of the missing your parents, missing the food, and at multiple levels, it's a process of readjustment.
My name is Shalini Toscano, and this is the first time I'm speaking publicly about my husband's death and suicide. I've been doing mental health advocacy for about 2 years now, since his death, starting from his funeral, where we had a few people address mental health, particularly in the Indian community. My sister-in-law, Andrea Cronus-Toscano, who's a professor at University of Maryland, took to the pulpit and spoke to everyone attending. I think we had over 300 people who were there. And from that point, because we were open about his death, the fact that it was a suicide and that he struggled with depression since he was a teenager. And Anand had attempted suicide when he was 20 years old. And so one of the indicators, as Dr. Srivastava had mentioned, is that if someone has previously attempted suicide and they're in a stressful situation, there's a likeliness that they might do it again. And this was the case for Anand when he came to Canada. The first time he attempted suicide was when he was 20, and it was after receiving the results to his exams. And he scored a few marks less than his brother did, and his parents were absolutely devastated. And the way he described it was that it was like a funeral at his home. And neither of his parents asked him why he did it. And it's not a surprise, because Indian parents generally don't talk about feelings. They brush things under the carpet and just hope things will go away. So when he arrived to Canada, he became very focused on getting a job. And what he didn't realize was that the immigrant experience is difficult. It's hard. It's hard to integrate into a new country. And when you come to North America with just immigration papers and not a job transfer or to study, you have to start from the bottom. And he took this quite hard. And after about a year, I noticed that he would become quite withdrawn at times. And so finally, I suggested going to a marriage counselor. So we had done that, tried it for a bit, but his depression got worse. And as a result of his depression, he did things that made things difficult for both of us. So I took him again to another counselor. But about in 2018, in June, he started talking about taking his own life. Actually, the year before that, when I took him for the marriage counseling, when we came home, he actually opened up to me and he said, if I die tomorrow, it wouldn't matter. And when I asked him, it scared me when he said that. And when I asked him why, he said, I don't have a job. I'm not doing anything. I feel useless. These were things that were told to him while he was growing up all the time, that he was useless, and it stayed with him. And so when he started a year later in June 2018 talking about taking his own life, I called the paramedics, I called our marriage counselor, I called the police, I called his family. But his family said that, he does this all the time. He's just trying to manipulate you, because his family in the States did not know, his brother did not know he attempted suicide before, because his parents never told him about it. So they were completely in the dark about his mental health history. On my family side, my brother, my cousin Johnny, my sister Elizabeth, we all tried to get him help. My cousin Johnny came over, tried to talk to him. He's a medical doctor, but he just wouldn't open up. And I honestly believe that had he got the go-ahead from his own family to get help, he would have. Because there was one time we were watching this television show, This Is Us, where the character Kevin took his entire family as an adult for a therapy session. And my husband turned to me and he said, he's like, I want a therapy session like that with 𝐈𝐴 and Sanju. That's his mother and brother. And he just felt, and I asked him, well, why don't you get some help? And he basically said, whenever I expressed my feelings before, they were always denied. So I feel like I have nowhere to go to. And so my whole advocacy now is mainly trying to address to people that it is necessary to talk about mental health. It's very essential, because it is the only way we will diminish the stigma. It's the only way we'll be able to understand what others who are suffering with any sort of mental illness are going through. And it's the only way we'll be able to understand, educate ourselves, and be able to support them as well. And what my hope with Sahyog is to create a space where it'll be a safe space for people to share their struggles. And I want the students, Indian students who are here right now, to understand that it takes strength to be vulnerable, and there's no shame in asking for help. And it doesn't matter. Log kya kenge does not matter. Helping and listening to others matter, and you matter.
I think,
Yes.
Mr. Rajesh, shall I continue to discuss?
Yes, please. Yeah, that's please. Yeah.
I think, Shalini, you are brave. It is extremely difficult to talk about near and dear one who has committed suicide. But I appreciate your commitment to the cause, that you have associated with this organization, and you are taking this movement forward. Let me throw some light on what was the problem. So a couple of risk factors that we need to remember. As I said, it is not always a mental illness, but a history of previous attempt of suicide, whether it is years back or 5 years back or 10 years back. It has been found that these people are at added risk, and about 50% of them make another attempt. The second, when people are unemployed or have social stress, their problems further increase. And to make the matter worse, that if the problem remains untreated, unattended, it is very unfortunate most of the time. So taking a lesson from what Shalini has spoken is that someone needs to talk in the family if there are risk factors like a mental illness, depression, substance abuse, or a previous attempt. One should be very careful and take it very seriously. Family members need to be educated, and that is why we say that even suicide prevention should be part of the teaching curriculum in the university. Unless that happens, we would not be able to train people, educate every student to give a right message. Our students today are going to be tomorrow's parents, and therefore their responsibility is much more. I suggest that more and more education, discussion amongst the group goes on so that they can identify any crisis amongst their friends, their children, their sisters, their brothers, and take a recourse for intervention. Let me finally say that the treatment is highly effective. Those people who face a crisis, they all become all right except a minuscule percentage of them who go on to attempt. And if treated, the transition from the stage of suicidal ideation to suicidal attempt and then further to suicide is very, very less. It's not very high. So there are positive things that it can be identified, it can be treated, and it's unfortunate that we do not know about it. And I think as time comes, more and more people will get involved and they'll take